Have you noticed that in the most heated discussions, who speaks less often comes out stronger? Perhaps no one has told you this, but there is a silent, invisible, bewildering and extremely powerful weapon capable of disarming egos, dominating conflicts and turning the game of any conversation. And this weapon is not a brilliant argument, nor a sharp answer. It's silence, but not any silence. We are talking about a strategic, conscious silence that does not shut up out of fear, but imposes itself by domination. If you've come out of a discussion feeling like you've talked too much and won less, maybe it's time to discover the true power of not reacting. Prepare yourself. What follows may change the way you communicate and how you are perceived forever. The power of silence. How many times did you come out of a discussion feeling frustrated, exhausted, with the feeling that the more arguments you presented, the stronger the other person became in your position? Stop for a moment and reflect. When was the last time you really changed your mind during a heated debate? The annoying truth that few admit is that most of our discussions do not seek the truth. What is really at stake is something much more primitive and visceral: our ego. Note the pattern that repeats itself constantly around us. On social networks, at work meetings, family dinners, the dynamic is always the same. The more intensely we try to prove our point, the more firmly the other person clings to his own. It is as if our words, instead of building bridges of understanding, erected walls of resistance. Have you ever noticed that even the most logical and well-constructed arguments often have the opposite effect than expected? Instead of convincing, they only strengthen each other's resistance. This is the great irony of human communication. Our desperate need for reason undermines our ability to really influence. But what if there was a completely different approach? A counterintuitive strategy that reverses this destructive dynamic? What if the true power was not in what you say, but precisely in what you choose not to say? What would happen if, at the moment you feel the irresistible impulse to argue, to prove your point, to win the discussion, you simply chose silence? Not a silence born of weakness or lack of arguments, but a deliberate, strategic, conscious silence. A silence that is not absence, but absolute presence. Imagine the bewilderment of your interlocutor when, instead of feeding the vicious cycle of attacks and defenses, you simply break the expected pattern. The emptiness that your silence creates generates an almost palpable tension, a space that the other feels compelled to fill. This is a truth that few discover. In the dynamics of human power, he who speaks compulsively exposes himself, reveals himself, weakens, while the one who masters the art of silence keeps his position intact, impenetrable, powerful. Think about the most recent discussions you have had. How many words have you wasted trying to change other people's opinion? And how many of those words really made a difference? What could you achieve if, instead of reacting automatically, you paused, breathed, and consciously chose when to speak, and more importantly, when to shut up? Have you ever wondered why it is so difficult to change your opinion, even in the face of evidence contrary to our beliefs? Why do we cling so fiercely to what we believe to be true? The answer lies in the depths of the human mind. There is an ancestral mechanism operating silently in our brain, the confirmation bias. As an invisible filter, it carefully selects the information we receive, preserving those that reinforce our convictions and discarding those that challenge them. This is not a random defect, it is an evolutionary survival strategy. Our primitive brain was programmed to maintain coherence at all costs. Constantly questioning our own beliefs would be paralyzing for our ancestors who needed quick answers in the face of danger. But what ensured our survival in the primitive savannas may be condemning us to the complex contemporary social jungles. This is where the revolutionary vision of Friedrich Nietzsche comes in. Have you ever delved into the thought of this philosopher who, more than a century ago, seemed to see through the illusions of his time and ours? For Nietzsche, The true power was never in the domination of others, but in the domination of oneself. The ability to control your own impulses, to resist automatic reactions, to transcend the immediate instinct of response. This is the supreme power. Think for a moment. Which is harder? Win a discussion with sharp words or contain the irresistible impulse to respond when provoked? This is the essence of the Nietzschean concept of Übermensch, the Superman. It is not a being with supernatural powers, but one who has overcome the slavery of his own instincts, one who does not automatically react like a conditioned animal, but consciously chooses his answers. Nietzsche's Superman is not the one who screams loudest in a discussion. It is the one who, in the whirlwind of emotions of a conflict, manages to stay focused, observing the chaos around without being consumed by it. Can you imagine the power that exists in not being controlled by the trigger of other people's words? The freedom to choose when and how to respond, or whether to respond. When someone tries to provoke you and you react instantly, who is in control? Who is pulling the strings that move your lips, that accelerate your heartbeat, that strain your muscles? The uncomfortable truth is that in most of our social interactions, we are puppets whose wires are easily manipulated by those who know which buttons to press. What Nietzsche proposed, and what we are now rediscovering, is the possibility of cutting these invisible threads. To answer not by automatic reflex, but by deliberate choice. And the most powerful tool for this liberation is within our reach. Although few have the courage to use it fully, this tool is conscious silence. Silence bothers, disturbs, destabilizes. Have you ever noticed how a prolonged moment of silence in a conversation can create an almost physical tension, as if the air between people became dense, charged with an invisible but palpable energy? This is not a subjective impression. It is a profound psychological reality that reveals much about our social nature. We exist in an ocean of words. When this constant flow is suddenly interrupted, something primordial in us is activated, an ancestral discomfort with emptiness. But what if this apparent emptiness was not empty at all? What if silence, far from being absence, was the purest manifestation of presence? When you consciously choose not to respond to a provocation, what are you really doing? Is it demonstrating weakness, as many misinterpret, or is it exerting the deepest and rarest kind of strength, control over itself? Strategic silence is not passivity, it is action in its most refined and powerful state. It is the difference between the automatic reaction of a chained animal and the calculated response of a strategist. Note what happens when, in the midst of a heated discussion, you simply shut up. Not a silence of defeat or submission, but an attentive, present, conscious silence. What happens to your interlocutor? First comes the surprise. The breaking of the expected pattern disorients. Then, the tension. The silence creates a vacuum that generates deep psychological discomfort. Finally, the almost physical need to fill it. Your interlocutor is compelled to speak more, to explain himself, often revealing his true intentions or contradicting himself in the process. In a society where everyone competes for the right to speak, whoever masters the art of strategically listening holds an unusual power. While others reveal their cards, you keep your protected, impenetrable. Have you ever noticed how the most influential people are rarely the ones who talk the most, but those who choose carefully when to speak out? Silence is the ultimate demonstration of self-control. In a world where reacting has become almost compulsory, restraining is revolutionary. Every unspoken word is a choice of energy preservation, integrity, power. Think about the discussions that consume your energy daily. Those provocative messages on social networks, those challenging comments in meetings, those insinuations at family lunches. How many of these verbal battles are really worth your emotional investment? The true power is not in winning all battles, but in choosing which ones deserve your engagement. The rest, the incessant noise that seeks only to pluck it from its center, deserves only your attentive silence. Imagine yourself able to remain steadfast while around you words are thrown like weapons. Visualize yourself keeping your center while others lose control. This is not only an exercise of imagination, it is a practice that can profoundly transform your interactions and, more importantly, your relationship with yourself. Strategic silence does not eliminate conflict, it transcends it. It does not avoid tension, it uses it. It does not retreat from the challenge, it reconfigures it in its favor. Throughout human history, those who have mastered the art of strategic silence have left indelible marks on the world. They are not only abstract theories, they are strategies proven by the most brilliant strategists who have ever walked among us. Have you ever wondered how Socrates, considered the wisest of his time, could disassemble the arguments of the most eloquent sophists without ever directly imposing his ideas? His method was ingenious in its simplicity. He did not affirm, he questioned. And between each question, a calculated silence. Watching his interlocutors debate their own contradictions, Socrates kept absolute control of the conversation without ever raising his voice. While the sophists sought to impress with elaborate rhetoric, Socrates mastered the art of empty space, the interval that forces the other to continue speaking until they reveal their own logical flaws. What would happen if you, instead of vehemently arguing against it in the next discussion, simply asked, "Why do you believe that?" And then wait in attentive silence while his interlocutor is forced to articulate and often question his own convictions. What about Steve Jobs? Have you noticed the magnetic power he exerted in his presentations? The man who revolutionized several industries mastered a technique that few executives have the courage to employ: the strategic pause. In crucial moments of his performances, Jobs was silent. While most presenters fear emptiness as an abyss, Jobs used it as a tool. Each calculated pause amplified the expectation, created tension, directed attention. Silence did not weaken your message, it potentialized. Imagine the impact when, instead of filling every second of an important conversation with words, you deliberately introduce moments of silence. What would happen to the perception of the words that come after? How would your presence be felt? How would your message be absorbed? And what about Miyamoto Musashi, the legendary Japanese swordsman never defeated in more than 60 duels? His opponents often reported something disturbing. Even before the first blow, they felt psychologically defeated by Musashi's silent presence. In his classic, The Book of Five Rings, Musashi reveals that his technique was not based only on physical skill, but on psychological mastery. While his opponents agitated, talked, tried to intimidate him, Musashi remained in undisturbed silence. This stillness was not passive, it was a constant pressure that destabilized the opponent even before the physical confrontation. Can you see the power of this silent presence? The ability to remain calm and centered while those around you lose emotional balance, revealing your intentions, exposing your weaknesses, wasting your energy. What these different masters shared was the deep understanding of a universal truth. Who speaks too much is exposed. Those who react impulsively lose control of the situation. Those who do not master the art of silence will never master the art of influence. In an age of incessant communication, where noise is constant and valued, strategic silence becomes not only a tactic, but an evolutionary advantage. It is the difference between the amateur who reacts and the master who responds. Between the impulsive who lets himself be provoked and the strategist who observes before acting. What would your life be like if you could apply this ancestral knowledge in your daily interactions? How would your personal and professional relationships change if you mastered the art of strategic silence? Let's make it concrete. bringing this millennial power to the challenges of your daily life. Imagine the following scene. During an important meeting, a colleague makes a provocative comment, clearly trying to destabilize him in front of everyone. His immediate instinct is to defend himself, counterattack, prove him wrong. It's almost physical. The urge to respond burns in his throat. It is precisely at this moment that the true test of power presents itself. Instead of yielding to the automatic reflex, you breathe deeply, maintain steady but serene eye contact, and then silence. Not a silence of defeat, but of deliberate choice. What happens next? The seconds lengthen. The tension grows. Everyone in the room unconsciously holds their breath. Your provocateur, waiting for an explosive reaction that does not come, begins to feel uncomfortable. The silence becomes a mirror that reflects your own hostility, now exposed to all without the shield of your emotional reaction to justify it. Do you realize the dynamics that have just reversed? Instead of falling into the prepared trap, you turned it into a silent demonstration of self-control. Body language is crucial in this process. Strategic silence is not only the absence of words, it is a total presence, attentive, powerful. His posture remains erect, his shoulders relaxed. His gaze is neither aggressive nor submissive. It is observant, centered, unwavering. When you finally choose to speak, and this choice must be conscious, not reactive, your words will carry a weight that no heated speech could ever contain. Think about how you can apply this strategy in different contexts. In negotiations, for example, after making an offer, the common impulse is to fill the subsequent silence with justifications, concessions, explanations. Inexperienced negotiators fear emptiness. Masters know that it is precisely in this vacuum that the best opportunities arise. The next time you submit a proposal or price, try it. Make your placement clear and direct, and then silence. Stay present, attentive, receptive. But don't say another word. Notice how this simple act completely changes the dynamics of the process. In personal relationships, when confronted with emotional accusations, the tendency is to respond in the same coin, feeding a destructive cycle of attacks and defenses. What would happen if, instead, you listened carefully, breathed, and then allowed a moment of silence to create space for a genuine response, rather than an automatic reaction? Strategic breaks are another powerful tool in your arsenal. When you talk, introduce conscious intervals between important ideas. These moments of silence do not dilute your message. They amplify it, creating space for absorption, emphasizing crucial points, demonstrating absolute confidence in your words. The real test of this practice will come in the most challenging moments, when you feel attacked, when the urge to defend yourself or counterattack is almost irresistible. It is in these moments of great attention that the power of strategic silence manifests itself most fully. Remember, silence is not passivity. It is an active choice, a conscious positioning, a demonstration of inner strength that few have. It is the difference between being driven by circumstances and being the conductor leading the orchestra of social interaction. Imagine yourself 6 months from now, after consciously incorporating strategic silence into your daily life. What transformations would you perceive? How would the people around you respond differently to your presence? The benefits of this ancestral practice go far beyond momentary interactions. They fundamentally redefine your position in the social ecosystem. First, observe how the respect you inspire transforms. There is something deeply impacting in someone who does not need to react impulsively, who does not allow himself to be easily provoked, who chooses his moments with surgical precision. It is a rare quality that even unconsciously people recognize and value. Have you noticed how we are naturally attracted to those who speak less, but whose words carry weight? How do we pay more attention to what is rarely pronounced? This is not a random phenomenon. It is the manifestation of a deep psychological principle. We value what is scarce. In a world where everyone competes for the right to speak, your ability to strategically silence makes every word yours more valuable. It is no coincidence that the most respected figures in any field are rarely the most verbose. Social influence is another transformative benefit. When you master strategic silence, the dynamics of conversation subtly shift in your favor. You don't control people. That would be superficial and ethically questionable manipulation. You control the context, the rhythm, the flow of interaction. It is a kind of silent leadership that does not need to be announced. Think about the meetings you attend. Who really directs the course of the discussion? It is rarely who speaks more. It is often that person who, with precise interventions and strategic pauses, shapes the course of the conversation without apparent effort. Perhaps the deepest benefit is your own liberation. When you no longer automatically react to every provocation, every negative comment, every attempt at emotional manipulation, you become fundamentally free. Have you noticed how vulnerable we are to manipulation precisely because of our compulsion to respond? When someone knows exactly which buttons to press to get an emotional reaction from you, who is really in control of the interaction? Strategic silence cuts these invisible threads that allow others to pull their emotional strings. Each time you choose not to react, you are declaring your psychological independence. You are affirming, I decide how to respond to this world. I am not a slave to emotional triggers. This practice also profoundly transforms your conversations. When you are not constantly formulating your next answer while the other is still talking, something extraordinary happens. You really listen. The external silence creates space for an internal clarity. Your answers come to arise not from defensive reactions, but from genuine understanding. Have you ever experienced that rare feeling of being truly heard by someone? Not just your words, but your intention, your underlying feeling. This quality of attention is what you cultivate through strategic silence. And finally, there is the benefit of control over interactions. When you master this art, difficult conversations no longer drain you emotionally. Provocations lose their power over you. Conflicts turn from threats into opportunities to demonstrate self-control. Imagine yourself staying centered while others around you lose control. Visualize yourself navigating calmly through situations that would destabilize you before. This is not a fantasy. It is the natural and inevitable result of consistent practice of strategic silence. This is the choice before you now, to continue reacting automatically to the world, allowing external circumstances to determine your internal states. Or begin the journey of self-mastery, where each conscious silence is a step toward freedom and authentic personal power. The path of strategic silence is not easy. It goes against deeply rooted instincts, but their rewards transform not only their interactions, but their fundamental experience of being in the world. And you, have you ever stopped to observe how many times you lose yourself trying to fit into what they expect of you? Maybe it's time to look inside, question old truths, and rescue who you really are. If this video touched something in you, share with those who also need to reflect on it, and tell me in the comments where in the text you most identified yourself. I really want to read you. See you in the next video.